Welcome to Impactful. Today we will talk about the responsible usage of AI. Our guest is Olivia Gambelin, a globally recognized expert in the field of AI. Welcome, Olivia.
Thank you so much, Branislav. I'm excited to be here.
Today we will speak about your book, Responsible AI, which will be published soon. What motivated you to start writing it?
Well, I have always been fascinated by ethics and artificial intelligence, and I've been working in this field really since it was first making its transition out of academia and into industry. So I had all of these years of experience built up of advising and working on very specific AI ethics projects and responsible AI challenges really for companies. And I started noticing that a lot of the focus when it comes to responsible AI was a little bit narrow. It was focusing specifically on technical solutions, which are important, but the problems that I was encountering with the clients that I was advising rarely ever had to do with the technology and more had to do with actually really just simple business functions around people and process that goes behind the scenes of actually supporting the build and use of that technology. So I started seeing just over and over again this bigger and bigger hole in the resources that exist out there when it comes to responsible AI, of companies not knowing just where to simply start. You're not usually starting with the technology, you're starting with the people. So that was some of the starting motivation that I had that really kickstarted part of the process that went behind this entire book.
What was the most challenging part during the writing process?
The hardest part for me, honestly, was figuring out what not to include in the book, because it was very easy for me to try and put all of the information I know into all of these sentences and words, and then I think I could have written a whole library if I had decided to. So actually having to narrow down and understanding what some of that preliminary foundational knowledge that's missing that needs to be there, that was the hard part, the narrowing down of the information.
What makes this book different, and who is it written for?
What makes this book different is it's a business book. It's not a technical book. So if someone is looking for specific solutions around, say, how to implement fairness, how to implement privacy technically, how to implement, say, transparency or accountability on a technical level, they're going to be very disappointed in this book. This book itself is specifically written for a leadership audience, management audience that is putting into place the key structures needed to execute on responsible AI. So how I have basically written it, hopefully it's as evergreen of material as I can get it, since the pace of AI changes so quickly. What I really put a lot of focus into was distilling the primary impact points where leaders can translate ethical values into action. But instead of looking at specific ethical principles, I looked at the structures that were needed, the operational, the procedural, the cultural structures that are needed to translate those values into action. So I like to think of it more as providing the scaffolding and the structure of the building that a company will need to execute on responsible AI, rather than giving a recipe for very specific solutions.
Your book covers three main areas: people, process, and technology.
Yeah, so something that is often quite a big mistake one of the biggest mistakes actually that I find business leaders running into is approaching AI and responsible AI both as a technical problem. And yes, there is a very important technical layer to it all, that AI is technology at the end of the day, but that's really the tip of the iceberg. That's what is coming out of much more that's going on below the surface. And so you have the tip of the iceberg, which is technology, and then underneath it, you have the people and process. And how I like to explain this is thinking about it, people is really, who's building your technology. You need to have a who if you're going to have technology. Then the process is looking at how are they building it. You need to know how they're building it or using AI in order to actually have the AI at the end of the day. And it's only then that you're able to ask, what are they building or what are they using? So you need to know the who and the how before you can actually even begin to approach the what. Because if your people aren't in place, if they're not trained, if the culture isn't right, if they don't know how to build, or they don't have the proper protocols and governance in place, then the technology that they're building or using at the end of the day, that's going to be full of problems, and it's going to be very difficult to try and make any significant change or adjustments without having the people and process in place first. So they're all interconnected, and they're all equally important. The reason I stress people and process is people and process are often overlooked at first when companies are engaging in AI. So I'm trying to give voice to the side of good business practice as the world of AI is really developing.
We cannot forget to mention company values.
So how I like to describe ethics and values, they're like your directions. So you have your company values, you have your company mission. That's what you're trying to achieve. Your values, the ethics of your company, those are the directions to help you go towards that company mission, to achieving it. So you have company values and also societal and regional and industrial standards and values for a reason. They're the ones that support in actually achieving a mission or achieving a goal. And so ethics is really what's helping you assess for your decisions in alignment with those values. So the closer you are in alignment with those values, the closer you are to success, the better you are at achieving that success, at achieving that mission and those objectives that you set out to in the first place.
Also, we'll have a chance to learn a bit more about ethics by design methods.
Absolutely. So ethics by design is my favorite side to ethics. Ethics is think of it as like this two-sided coin. You have the risk mitigation side, and then you have the innovation side to ethics. Risk mitigation, you're looking to protect for your values. Innovation, you're looking to align with your values. And it's really on that innovation side that you see ethics by design at play. And what I mean by that is when you are looking at ethics by design, you are looking at specific ethical principles like fairness, trust, transparency. These sound like buzz terms sometimes, the amount that I say them, but you're taking these values and you are designing specifically for them. They're not an afterthought. They're not something that you have to retroactively go back and fix for. They are part of the design features. And that's really what it means by ethics by design, is incorporating these key values into the actual, let's say, DNA of these systems that we're building.
So, what are the unique challenges and opportunities when we are talking about implementing responsible AI?
Probably one of the biggest challenges is the scale that it needs to be done at. So there's a tendency for silos of communication, for departments to be separated in terms of understanding what's going on across even departments within the same branch of a company. For example, I've worked on cases where I've introduced colleagues to each other from different teams. And to me, it blows me away because I would think, oh, of course you would naturally be talking together. But no, some of my projects have been to actually find where the communication is broken down and needs to be reestablished. This is all to say the scale at which responsible AI needs to operate on, the amount of communication that it needs for support can be a challenge for large enterprise. One of the strengths for large enterprise is really the ability to actually set standards of practice. So, for example, we will look to companies like Microsoft, like IKEA, like Salesforce as the standard setters for practice in AI. So in their own respective industries. And so these large enterprises have such a great opportunity to be able to set that standard in terms of expectations. Now, when looking at the SME side, one of I would say the bigger challenges that the SMEs currently face is time and resources. They're not going to have the same access to resources. And right now, responsible AI still is a bit of a niche expertise. And so finding someone that has good experience, or building out a team that has good experience, that level of expertise can be costly, and it's necessary though. There are free resources out there, but really being able to make effective change in a company, you do need that expertise. So it can be sometimes difficult for SMEs to access the expertise needed, or access, say, the training or the more customized resources, since those are still a little bit more on the upper end. But the opportunity for SMEs is it's much easier for them to pivot. They are in a position where they can actually embrace the innovative side of ethics much more easily. For them, it's a competitive advantage when they're really standing out by their values. And so they have that great opportunity to embrace and quickly change and adopt to this cutting edge technology at the same time. So I can't say which one, if large enterprise or SME has it better or worse off. It's just unique challenges and opportunities in both directions.
During AI implementation, it's important for everyone in the company to collaborate, but it's also beneficial to have the help of an AI specialist.
So, and there's a whole chapter in the book just about these kind of roles. And one of the things that I stress with this is, and as a reader would experience going through the book, it may feel like this is a lot to handle. This is a lot to cover. There's a lot that needs to be done. And that's true. There's no beating around the bush here. There's no easy button out. This does require change. This does require significant work and investment, for the long run. I mean, granted, this is work up front for very significant long-term benefits. So if you are trying to add on these very critical, business critical tasks onto someone and onto individuals and positions that are already covering other responsibilities, it's very easy to overload a team. It's very easy to push people towards the direction of burnout when they don't have both the skill set and the time necessary to execute on these. Versus if you're bringing in an AI ethicist, if you're bringing someone in that's trained to do this, that person, their sole focus is on creating responsible AI solutions, executing on them, ensuring that alignment with values. So it's almost like this relief of, oh, there's someone covering it. I have the questions in my head. I want to make sure that this is being covered. Oh, there's someone that's actually responsible for this and who will tell me if something's not aligned, if something's not working. So that kind of relief is huge. But also, when you are working with an ethicist, they're trained to do these tasks. They're trained to do this kind of critical thinking. So something that would take someone that isn't trained in the field of ethics or responsible AI, maybe say 2 weeks, could take an ethicist 2 days. So it's also a time of efficiency. You're bringing in someone that doesn't need to learn from the ground up. They already have a good, strong understanding of what needs to be done. And so then they're focused more on customizing and executing rather than just trying to get their minds wrapped around the problem in the first place.
When we are talking about responsible AI, what are the most challenging situations at this moment?
Yeah, and there's, I like to say, there's this phrase in English that we have that goes something along the lines of every good family, like every perfect family is similar, but every messed up family is messed up in their own way. I know I've butchered the phrase there, but it kind of works the same with AI. Responsible, good AI all looks fairly the same. A lot of the solutions, a lot of structure, hence what actually my book is based on is pulling out that structure, the good pieces that are common across the board, being able to highlight those. That's common standard practice. The challenges and the significant issues are going to look very different depending on what industry you're in, what kind of AI you're using, what day of the week it is. Honestly, there's always something going wrong with AI. I would say that the significant challenges, though, if I was trying to paint a broad brush, would be the first one is to understand that AI is a holistic challenge. Hence, it needs the people and process behind it. It is not just a piece of technology. To understand that the adoption and the use of AI, how it's being used, depends less on the technology and more on the people and the process. You're just going to hear me repeating that over and over again. It depends less on the technology, more on the people and process. So that challenge requires a mental shift, a mindset shift in the approach to AI. And that would be what I would say one of the big challenges with responsible AI currently right now is that the need for that mindset shift. In terms of AI itself, I would say from a business perspective, adoption of AI is actually one of the biggest challenges. We have all of these new generative AI tools, but companies right now are really struggling with understanding the right use case for them. So I see less challenges with companies creating new AI solutions. I see more challenges for companies actually being able to sell and place and use that kind of tooling. For example, I was talking to someone the other day who their team just adopted Copilot. And she said, we have it. We don't know what to do with it. It's a cool tool, but what do we do with it? And in cases like that, if your end users don't know what to do with the technology, they're not going to be your users for very long. So I would say that's actually a bigger challenge when it comes to, and so doing that responsibly, learning how to create use cases, responsible use cases, because like I said, the use of AI is less about the technology and more about how it's being used in the people. If we're looking at the ethics of it all, gosh, there's too many different challenges in different directions there. It depends on the industry. But I would say I would love to, instead of saying, oh, this is a challenge, and I'd rather challenge people to actually open their minds to more ethics by design techniques. So instead of tacking on these ethical values at the end and trying to retrospectively fix for them, incorporating them into the very beginning, into the very foundations of their AI build and use. So I would like to challenge people to that in these upcoming years.
If someone wants to learn more about this topic, where should they start?
So as I was saying, one of the biggest challenges is not being able to recognize that responsible AI is a holistic challenge. So my book really stresses the whole picture. The other part, and this actually leads into one of the tools that is accessible through my book, and actually I've released it under Creative Commons license. So it's something called the Values Canvas. And what the Values Canvas does, it's a holistic management template for developing responsible AI strategies and documenting existing ethics efforts. What it does is basically give you a full picture view of what needs to be done and what you are currently doing in terms of ethics and responsible AI. It's pinpointed these high impact points where you translate ethics into action. And the whole motivation behind creating the Values Canvas, that tool, which the book actually goes into depth about how to use, when to use it, and so on. The whole driving purpose of the Values Canvas is to answer the two biggest questions that companies are stuck on right now of where do I start and what am I missing? You know, you can't order 5 ethics in blue. So where do you start? What even is a starting point when you say, okay, we're going to commit to responsible AI? Great, then what? Values Canvas is designed to help direct you towards, well, here's where you need to go next. It also, I hear companies time and time again go, what am I missing? What am I missing? What else do I need? Values Canvas helps give that whole picture and pinpoint, well, you're missing these key factors. So like I said, Values Canvas, the book goes into depth on it. It's also online at thevaluescanvas.com. You can actually download your own copy and be able to use it. And there are a series of case studies being published on it right now through the website too. So it's a great resource, and it's my hope that it becomes a commonly used resource for people in responsible AI, creating really a shared terminology that we need to be able to operate on, and the ability to pinpoint what kind of solutions you need.
I would like to motivate everyone by saying that I have completed the canvas. The questions are easy to answer, it's great and user-friendly.
Thank you. That's actually great motivation for people. Oh, and the canvas is free to download. That's always helpful to hear. So like I said, I'm hoping if you are coming from an entrepreneurial background and you've ever run across the business model canvas, the values canvas was modeled in the same kind of intentions. So that will hopefully give you a reference point as well for what kind of tool this is.
For the end of this episode, I will say that your book, Responsible AI, will be published this month.
I think a message that I would love to share specifically about, I guess, align with the book as it's coming out, is that this is part of the bigger picture. It's a key part, this strategic side to responsible AI. It's a very necessary part that's been a blocker for a long time. And so I'm hoping that this helps get through some of that inertia. But to encourage people that they're 5 years ago, this space was like the Wild West. There wasn't necessarily a clear path towards success. It was confusing. People didn't know where to start. People didn't know what was effective. Now that's not true. We've erased a lot of that confusion. We've tackled it. We've found good ways to actually apply responsible AI and ethics. There are set methods and templates for success. And I say all of this as a word of encouragement that this is not an untamable beast or impassable mountain to get around, that this is actually something quite doable and has significant business impact across the board. Again, the book goes more into that, but one of my favorite statistics that I've been quoting everywhere now comes from a study from MIT and BCG, where it found that companies with holistic responsible AI initiatives and strategies in place experience a reduction of 28% in failure rate of AI, which is unheard of. That's huge. So the encouragement that let's say reduction in risk that everyone's after, reduction in AI risk is attainable. And there's a clear path to that success.
This is the perfect message for the end of the interview. You watched another episode of Impactful. Thank you and see you next week.